Greetings and welcome to Unmuted. I'm Judge E.J. Russell, and here at Unmuted, we want to take the muzzle off and talk candidly with you. Unmuted will feature a variety of guests, including politicians, community leaders, entertainers, decision makers, and others addressing news-breaking issues and compelling concerns to the community and the nation. If you would like to contact us, please send an email to unmuted@myyahoo.com. That's unmuted at my.yahoo.com. Today's guest is Ted Henifin from the city of Jackson, appointed as the water czar that so many people will call him, but he has an official name. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Unmuted.
Thank you, Judge Russell. I appreciate it.
Well, tell us what that official title is. It's very long. It didn't make the screen because it's so long.
It is a mouthful. So technically, I am the interim third-party manager of the Jackson water system, and I was appointed by a federal judge here in Jackson, Judge Wingate, on November 29th.
Well, and in order for this your appointment to have required federal government interceding in this process, Jackson has, as most people know, all over the country, all over the world, a very, very serious water problem. It doesn't take much for people to get a boil water notice. They don't have pressures and all of those kinds of things. So what have you been tasked to do?
So the order essentially puts the control of the entire water system under my control to, one, sustain it or stabilize it, get it back to where it's providing clean, safe drinking water to everyone all the time. And then there's 13 priority projects that were identified in the order that I am to start or finish, at least through the first year of the order. Looks like we'll be extending that over some period of time. There actually is no end date. A lot of people get hung up on, when will I be gone? When is the order done? The order's done when we've satisfied the judge that we've succeeded in stabilizing the system, putting it on a sustainable financial path forward, at least started. Some of these projects, these priority projects, are going to be very lengthy in construction time, so we'll have at least started some of those. Some will extend beyond the 3. Some are going to be 10 years and longer in the making. So a lot of things have to happen before the order will be lifted, and we don't know what the future for Jackson Water is beyond that, but we're laser focused on stabilizing the system and making sure everyone has water. And we're seeing a lot of positive results already without having done real significant work yet. A lot to come. We're just getting going. It's been a all-out sprint from the end of November. We suffered through a disaster at Christmas time, which was extremely unfortunate that we almost repeated what happened at the end of the summer. Many people woke up Christmas morning without water. It wasn't exactly the way I would like to have started my first month as the person in charge or responsible for the water system. But we did recover maybe a little faster than we had in the past, and we've learned a lot since then, and things are actually been very good, knock on wood, since sometime when we recovered in late January. So we feel I'm very bullish on Jackson Water right now. I think we may have the worst of it behind us, but there's still a lot of investment, a lot of construction, and a lot of work to be done in front of us.
Well, let's cross our fingers that the worst is behind us. But a lot of people want to know, who is this guy and where did they find him to come to Jackson? So let's take a step back.
Sure.
We've got a lot to unpack today. I hope we are able to get to it.
Certainly.
But who is Ted Henifin?
So Ted Henifin has spent the last 4 decades plus in public sector, utility, and public works work at the federal, local, regional, and state levels. So I've done government in a variety of levels, all in Virginia. I actually went to the University of Virginia, not known for its engineering school, has a small engineering school, and went from there to the Hampton Roads area. So those who aren't familiar with Virginia geography, that's the southeastern corner of Virginia. It's an interesting dynamic of cities and counties. And in Virginia, unlike Mississippi, cities are independent from counties. And so you've got large cities that butt up against each other with no county in play at all, and counties that come into the edges of those cities and have no authority or responsibility for anything going on within the city. So I think there's only a couple states in the country that have this structure where counties and cities do not overlap. Why that's interesting is we've got essentially 18 independent localities that comprise the Hampton Roads area, so the southeastern corner of Virginia, which includes 7 large cities: the city of Virginia Beach, about 500,000 people, the city of Norfolk, the city of Portsmouth, city of Chesapeake, city of Newport News, the city of Hampton, and then we've got the city of Suffolk, and then the rest are counties and some smaller communities that make up those 18. All in all, about 1.8 million people. I've lived there and practiced my entire professional career in that region in both what we call the south side and north side, because there's the peninsula, which is the Virginia Peninsula, comes down, and then there's a body of water called the Hampton Roads that separates that from the Virginia Beach, Norfolk side of the water, the south side. So I've lived on both sides of the Hampton Roads area, driven through the tunnel for years. Always fun in Hampton Roads because you have a body of water separating somebody from something all the time. Tunnels mean bridges and traffic and problems and congestion. So I prefer being here in Jackson. Actually, when I'm trying to get around, I can actually get places without getting stuck in traffic most of the time. There are a few problems on 55 from time to time. But so back to who I am in Virginia. So I went to work for the federal government for a number of years as a civilian working for the Navy. I did public works as a public works director for the city of Hampton, a fairly similar community to Jackson. Its population is about 140 to 150,000 people, so about the same size. Home to a fabulous historical black college university, the Hampton University, which they all like to refer to as the original HU, even though there's a little battle with Howard. But historical city from that perspective, longest continuous English-speaking settlement in North America. It dates back to 1610, so just after Jamestown folks came in 1607. Interesting history with enslaved people. With the first landing was there at Fort Monroe and in Hampton, and then the first the freed people during the Civil War sought refuge as in Fort Monroe and got protection. So a lot of slaves moved into Fort Monroe to get protection during the war. So very interesting dynamic in our community. We're about half black, half white. So not that dissimilar and not overly wealthy. So it's a similar community to Jackson. So long story to say, I was there 10 years as public works director, which I find probably the most challenging position you can take in public service because you touch everybody every day in some form or fashion. So my hat's off to anyone that serves as public works director here in Jackson or anywhere. Very challenging job. Moved from there to run the regional utilities. That 1.8 million people all had their wastewater, their sewage, treated by the same agencies. This was founded in 1940. Special legislation created this regional entity, the Hampton Roads Sanitation District. And we actually served every community in Hampton Roads, and we were actually serving some beyond that area, conveying and treating their wastewater, and then billing them for that, billing our customers directly for that. So had a large billing system with 480,000 accounts. We're taking care of 1.8 million people. So I really got a great flavor for running a utility, obviously bigger than the Jackson water system by about an order of magnitude, but all the same issues: billing, customer service, dealing with regulations, while it's on the wastewater side, not dissimilar from drinking water. And towards the end of my career there at Hampton Roads Sanitation District, we started a project where we were making drinking water from wastewater. And so I learned a lot about drinking water over my last 5 years, the standards, the requirements. That was a novel program for any system east of the Mississippi River, because we aren't water starved, very much like Mississippi. Southeastern Virginia gets plenty of rain. Unfortunately, has some coastal flooding along the way. But water wasn't a huge challenge as far as capacity and quantity for our region. It largely fixed by a 80-mile pipeline that was built from Lake Gaston, North Carolina to Virginia Beach in the 1980s. Big controversy there, taking water from a neighboring state. But that solved any water issues that were brewing in our Hampton Roads area. So no real issues on water, but we were learning how to make drinking water from wastewater to put it back in the ground to resupply the aquifer, which not everyone was using. We had a lot of surface water. Long story. Anyway, back to how I got here. I retired from there in February of 22. 15 years as the general manager of the organization, I thought it was time for some fresh perspective. I wasn't run out of town. I went on my own schedule, and I think I went at a great time. Just things were rolling very well. And I was looking forward to relaxing and enjoying retirement, which I did for, almost 5 months. And everyone said, you had to go back to work, didn't you? And I really didn't. A good friend of mine was the executive director, CEO of the U.S. Water Alliance. And when I retired, she asked if I would come to work part-time. And, old gray-haired guy, they have a nice title for that. It's senior fellow. And I was the senior fellow for the U.S. Water Alliance. And the goal of that was a remote position, a day or two a week, Zoom calls. Never thought there'd be a lot more beyond that. And it was an admirable and interesting project where they were trying to get bipartisan infrastructure money to small disadvantaged communities, because that money was coming through the state revolving loan fund program. Very complex, even for sophisticated engineering firms and utilities to figure out how to access that. The idea was to help those communities find ways to get to that money, because everyone should have access to that bipartisan infrastructure money. I was on a Zoom call in early August. Another part of the Alliance's work is on water equity, and they have a water equity network, which is a number of cities across the country that share similar issues to Jackson: disinvestment, loss of population, high minority population, high poverty rates. Putting those communities together to at least share best practices, lessons learned, find ways they can work together to maybe advance where they stand and improve their ability to provide water in a more equitable way. On that call in August with the city of Jackson, so I'm not worried about the water issues at that point. In fact, not really aware of water issues at that point. During the call, someone in Jackson mentioned they were on this boil water notice and had been since sometime in July. I took that as a bit of a shock that we were talking about sort of these longer term soft issues, and Jackson wasn't delivering water to their customers that they could actually drink. So we got off the phone and I called the executive director back up and said, we've got a lot of folks in our network, have a lot of experience. Maybe we should offer to go down there and see if we can help at all. That's sort of what got me into this whole problem. Got to watch what you say. So next thing I know, we found some foundation funding through the Kellogg Foundation to pay for travel costs and a small stipend. We lined up a couple other utility executives. We were struggling to find retired ones that really wanted to jump in and see what was going on, but we identified a couple people. I was the fully retired person available right away, and when we presented this concept to the city's administration and asked if they were interested, the mayor basically said, how fast can the Alliance get someone here? So I hopped on a plane. I think that was a Thursday or Friday, and I was here the following Wednesday, and that was September 13th, 14th. So that's what got me here.
And now you are here with us for a while. But we are going to, we're glad you're here.
Well, good, thank you.
And we're glad you like being in Jackson. Because of our traffic anyway.
And your food.
And the food
is awesome.
Yeah, you said you'd put on a few pounds.
Yeah, I have, way too many. I need to find a way to get that off.
Hey, we've got plenty of gyms around as well. But we're going to look at your tasks from the federal judge and unpack some of those tasks that you've been charged with. We're going to take a short break and we will be back. See you on the other side.
Thanks.
Footprint Farms is a beautiful 68-acre vegetable and cattle farm located in Jackson, Mississippi, and is Mississippi's largest urban farm. The mission of Footprint Farms is to provide the community access to healthy food choices, introduce our youth to agriculture, and provide training and technical assistance to small farmers and ranchers. The farm is open to the public every Friday from 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. to purchase fresh produce or visit us at the Mississippi Farmers Market located near the fairgrounds. We accept all forms of payment, including EBT and SNAP benefits. Looking for a beautiful venue for your next wedding, family reunion, or dinner? Footprint Farms offers a 3,000 square foot facility on 5 beautiful acres, perfect for your next event. For more information, visit our website at footprintfarms.com, Facebook and Instagram at Footprint Farms, or call us at 601-910-5534. Footprint Farms, farm fresh, city sweet.
All right, we are back with our guest today, Ted Henifin, the Jackson Water Czar. He is taking care of business in the city, and people actually have water. Let's talk a little bit about those several tasks that you said the judge gave you that may keep you here a little bit longer than a year or 3 years or 5 years. You may end up having to move that family here. But talk to us about the ones as you have prioritized them. I know that maybe you've ticked off one or two. So tell us where we are in the process.
Certainly. So obviously a number of these things need a little bit of engineering and study before we can just jump right in. And that's been a big part of what we've done over the first several months is line up the engineering firms, start the hard work of figuring out what needs to be done exactly. While the priority projects were relatively general in nature, they focus on a couple areas that we're actually working hard at the moment. The first was getting the plants under contract operation. And I know a lot of people bristle at the idea of a contractor coming in and displacing city employees. And it's not a preference of mine in my history. I haven't been a strong proponent of contracting out functions that should be core functions of government. And there's always pieces that make more sense, that there's better private sector partners that can do certain elements that aren't the core part of the function. In this case, running the plants is pretty core to making water. And what I found when we got here, for a variety of reasons, disinvestment, lack of a great trained workforce because water hasn't been on the forefront here in Jackson from a workforce development side, we just were lacking people, lacking many people. There were only a few licensed operators. They were working very, very long hours trying to keep things together. There was really no middle management at that point, no management until you got to the public works director who was interim and just been appointed at the time of the disaster declaration at the end of August. So we had a lot of great people to try and do their best, but they lacked the resources to be successful. And because I needed to do this quickly, we couldn't limp along and try to learn how to run the plant, hire new people that didn't know how to do that, train them, get them the equipment and tools they needed. A contract option was about the only thing we could come up with that would be faster. If we could find a contractor with the capabilities and experience to do this work, develop a relationship with them, get them comfortable with operating our treatment plants, that would move us light years forward from where we were in August and when I got here in September. And so we were able to get a national firm, Jacobs. They operate about 250 water and wastewater facilities across the country. Their model is only operate and maintain. They do not own any facilities. So this is not privatization. This is contract operation. Very different. The assets remain with the city of Jackson. The plants, the pipes, everything stays with Jackson. This is just finding contractors who are well-equipped, well-trained, and very experienced in operating water plants. And Jacobs really rose to the top on that. And so they were able to get initially some folks here that, because of liability reasons, weren't allowed to operate, but were bringing expertise and maintenance and guidance to our operators. We were rushing, and once the order was put in place, we've been working day and night with Jacobs to get them under contract, which we finally did at the end of February 20th. They officially took over the operation and maintenance of our 2 water plants and our 6 wells and the well system and the elevated tanks you see throughout the area. They didn't take the actual pipes in the ground because there's so many unknowns there. And so we still had no way to determine what the value of that work would be. And so on the plants, we were challenged to determine the value. So this first contract, which is a 6-month contract, is an open book cost reimbursement contract. Essentially, we're paying them what it costs to operate the plant, their labor costs, their actual material costs, the utility costs. That lets us see what the costs are with them operating, and it lets them understand what the costs are for them to do a firm bid come the end of the 6-month contract. So we're still moving towards a long-term contract. It might be a 10-year contract with them that would be awarded ideally late September is the goal. We're hoping we're in that position where we all have enough information to make an informed decision and award that contract and let them continue to have that responsibility in operation. The good news story of that, I said we didn't have many people working at the treatment plants in water at the time when I came here in September. Mm-hmm. The folks we had, majority of them, 20 of them, took positions with Jacobs. Mm-hmm. They were offered nice paying, well-benefited positions, and they are helping keep the water flowing right now and getting it out of the plant. And their experience with our plant and with our region has really helped Jacobs as well. So I think it's the best of all possible worlds. We've got the best contractor in the country, teamed up with the people here who are working hard to get the water to folks without the resources they needed. So I like to think it's a happy ending for the plant operations, and we're moving forward to maybe a very long-term relationship with Jacobs. They're committed to work with the community on developing some workforce development opportunities, internships potentially, apprenticeships, a lot of things on the table, but they haven't had time to really think about that either. They're trying to get the plant operating and keep it operating. And so while that sounds easy at this point, we still have a number of processes at the treatment plants that we're running manually, running without redundancy. Number one on that list was the chemical feed. So you've got a number of places you feed chemical into the water treatment process. Ideally, that's done with computers to understand what the flow is, what the water quality is coming into the system. Then the chemical feed computer is adjusting the feed as the water moves in to get the exact dosage that's needed. Very efficient. It's done all over the country at most water plants. Unfortunately, our system was pretty much not functional at that point. We got dosing by operators having to watch carefully for parameters and adjusting the dosing as in real time. Very challenging to do. And if you think about it, by the time a human is seeing it on a screen that there's a parameter starting to drift away from where it needs to be, they have to make an adjustment, and then often you miss, because you want to get it right back, so you crank it up. You shoot past where you need to be, then you got to crank it back down. So you get this just over-under going over every chemical feed that you're putting into the plant, and there's a number of them. So the end of that is the water quality isn't consistent, and not on any fault of an operator. It's just human cannot keep up with a computerized system that is measuring water flow and parameters and feeding the chemical appropriately on a real-time, like every 1/10 of a second basis, as opposed to waiting for a human intervention. So that system needs to be replaced. It's under design. That should be done within the year, and that's pretty fast for a multi-million-dollar replacement of all the pumps, all the sensors, all the pipes that make that happen in the plant. The second priority, and that's at our OB Curtis plant and our JH Fuel plant.
Let me ask you a couple of questions
Certainly.
right there. Tell our audience, where does the Jackson water that feeds into these plants come from?
Great question. The OB Curtis plant, which is it's actually in Ridgeland. It's just north along the reservoir, so it's very close to the spillway at the reservoir, but it's about a mile inland from there, next to the country club, and it's tucked into that little corner of Ridgeland. That's actually where the OB Curtis water plant is. It pulls its water directly from the reservoir. There's two 60-inch diameter, 5-foot tall pipes that go all the way from the reservoir to the plant, And the water comes through there to the O.B. Curtis plant. So that's its source. The J.H. Fuel plant is the one everyone sees off 55, and the waterworks turn, I think, is the local terminology for where the interstate tends to have a lot of accidents. And that's because they had to build it around that water plant that was built in 1914 originally. And that's
old.
It is, and it looks it in many places. It's been, improved upon a few times over the years, but there are many spots in that plant that look like they were from 1914, and they're definitely reaching their end of their useful life. And those that plant is pulls its water from the Pearl River directly. So there's an intake structure and a small. A small, not a dam, but it's actually a weir that essentially controls the water level at that point to make sure there's deep enough water where the water is pulled out for the water plant at all times. So even when the river starts going down to fairly low volumes when we're in a dry spell, there's still enough water depth right behind that weir to pull water into the J.H. Fuel water plant. So between those two, that's all we have to produce water. I'll talk maybe a little bit about the wells. The sort of southwest part of the city is served by a well system that was, again, fairly old, but working well because you can replace those pumps. And so that's a small section, about 15,000 customers or so are on well water in that part of the city. There's 6 wells that serve that, and that's independent from the surface water system. So the water that comes out of the Pearl River and the reservoir are what composes the surface water system, which serves the majority of Jackson. And then there's a small population that is served by the well system. Both high quality water, a little bit different in characteristics because one's groundwater and one's surface water. Both are monitored to meet health department requirements, both very safe, but just 2 different sources for folks. Actually, when you think about it, 3 sources. We've got a reservoir, a river, and groundwater supplying water to, depending where you are in Jackson at any given time.
Okay, so how does this interface with the pipes? Because there are pipes breaking all the time. So even if you have the systems working to get the chemicals right if the pipes break, help us understand, help me understand
Sure.
how that fits into everything.
So the distribution system from the day I got here has been highly suspect. So we push water out of the 2 treatment plants, and that's really the last time we have any insight to what's happening in the system, because we have pressure and volume that we measure at that point. So those 2 locations where the treatment plants are located, the water treatment plants, we push the water into the system. We know how much pressure it takes to get the water in the system, and we know what volume we're putting out. And then we really have little other knowledge of what's going on in the system other than the 10 elevated tanks. And so we can see the water levels in the tanks, and that gives us an idea of the pressure in that part of town. A normal system, you would have potentially pressure control zones within your city that would be isolated by valves, special valves, so that when you had a pipe break, the whole city wouldn't feel it, just the area within the pressure zone. And you try to design that so the storage in the tank could accommodate an outage while you're fixing that pipe. So you break the system up into smaller pieces, and then you can manage it a little better. Ours has always, at least in my experience, my limited experience in September, operates as one giant system without any individual pressure control. So when we would have a big pipe break, everyone would feel it. And unfortunately, the people that feel it the most are the ones that live furthest away from the plant at the highest elevations, which tends to be South Jackson. So a lot of folks are concerned about the fact that South Jackson tends to have the biggest issues whenever we had a pipe break, a problem at the plant where we couldn't push enough water into the system. Most of the rest of the city, to a great extent, didn't feel those as much as South Jackson did, or as often. And so the thought process was there might be some valves and problems in the system that we just don't know what they're doing. And so while it sounds crazy, we immediately started, once we got the plants under contract, we were freed up to start really focusing on the distribution system. And with the really the hard work of 2 individuals who were working for the city, and now they technically still are city employees, but they're detailed full-time to Jackson Water, and that's Jordan Hillman and Terrence Bird. They're brilliant. They study the system. They go out and do water quality measurements at fire hydrants where they suspect there may be a closed valve keeping the water from flowing the way it needs to. And through their work over the last 2 months, we've opened 50 valves roughly, large valves that have truly impacted the way the system should operate. The system should operate with those open. Those should only be closed when you need to isolate part of the system to make a repair, maybe do something else to deal with a unique problem, but you wouldn't leave these closed all the time. And the fact that there were that many closed really disrupted how water flowed through the system. That actually creates higher pressure in certain areas, which led to some of the more frequent pipe breaks we saw. It also led to lower pressure in parts of the system that should have been overcome just by the nature of what we were reading as pressure and volume going into the system. So their work will continue, and actually we've got a contract in place to identify and exercise every valve in the system, and we estimate that as about 4,000 valves. Wow. So we're far from that at this point, but that's a contract that will go on for the rest of this year. It's a national firm that competed with another national firm for that work, and you'll see their trucks around. It's Wax Water. They're interested. They've got great equipment on their trucks for using hydraulic equipment to open valves, to check the condition of those, to record everything that we're getting so we know where the valves are, how many turns it takes to open them, what position they were in when they found them, to get them open. So all that data will help us, again, be able to monitor and model the system, which is another thing we didn't have from day one, is a hydraulic model, a computerized model of the water system. So if you're going to do something in the system, you want to make sure you understand these are complex networks. We got miles and miles of pipes that are intertwined. You're pushing water in there at fairly high pressure. People are using it at different points of the day in different capacities. You need to be able to model that on a computer to understand, what if I add a pipe here? Or what if I close this valve? What happens to the system? And we didn't have that ability. So we're working on developing that model. We'll feed it the information from the valve study that's going on to find all these valves and figure out what position they're in. And all that will ultimately result in identifying, do we need specific improvements in the system? The model will help us see where those need to be so that South Jackson never runs out of water before some other part of the city. Those may be simple, they may be complex. We can't even guess what the projects that are come out of that model will be, but that work's ongoing currently, and we again expect something late this summer where the model will start indicating where we need to make some improvements in the distribution system. Been a lot of talk that we need to replace all pipes. We don't believe that's the case. What we do need to replace is about 100 miles of small diameter pipes. So within the system in Jackson, there's about 100 and some miles of street, mainly neighborhood streets, that have pipes that are water pipes that are under 4 inches in diameter. Most of those are 2-inch. Much smaller than current standards. 6-inch would be the minimum size you'd have today. And you can imagine a 2-inch pipe doesn't do real well distributing water to your neighborhood. If everybody's tied to it all using water at the same time and it's got to flow through a very small pipe, it's no wonder we've got a lot of pressure problems. And again, those pipes are largely galvanized steel. They've been corroded by our soil and by the water in them, and they are the ones subject to a lot of the breaks we have throughout the town. You'd see that bubbling up in your neighborhood streets, or you'd see a break on the sidewalk, or just a wet spot in the street. Been a lot of those. We've got a contractor now working on fixing a lot of those leaks, but we need to replace those pipes, and that's going to be the project that will last well beyond the stipulated order that I'm under, because it's probably going to take 10 years plus to replace 100 miles of pipe. Could be hundreds of millions of dollars before we're done, but the nice thing is we know where to focus, and we'll start. I know everyone's going to want their street first. That's probably the hardest part. Is going to be the prioritization process we go through, because you want to live on the street that's done in the first year, not the one that's done in the 10th year. And I understand that, but there's just not the capacity, contracting capacity, management capacity to try to go after all of them at one time.
So a lot of people may want to lay responsibility for the situation with Jackson Water at the feet of this administration. But how did we get ourselves here, if you have some idea?
You know, I've told many people, my job is forward focused. I'm trying to get us out of where we are and move us to a much better place. I don't spend a lot of time, trying to analyze how we got here. I can just say that it's been under-resourced for a long time, and it definitely predates the current administration. I think we can look back and see that there have been many studies done, very little has been acted upon. It's an older core city, and as mentioned earlier about the equity network the U.S. Water Alliance is doing, the fact you're losing population, moving out to the suburbs, you've got, and I think another challenge for Jackson, it's a very large city, square mile wise. We're about 110 square miles, which, compared to my hometown of Hampton, which we were talking about earlier, it's only 25 square miles. So much less infrastructure to cover the same number of people. So you've got a lot of infrastructure, you've got population decline, because at one time Jackson was over 200,000 and projected to be 300. We're going the wrong direction. We're down to 150 or so thousand people. And that same population is spread across that 110 square miles, meaning there's a lot more infrastructure to support them. And fewer people to pay for that infrastructure. The fact they've moved to the suburbs for a variety of reasons, I'm hoping it wasn't just the water, and it shouldn't be now, but they've moved for all sorts of reasons, and this has replayed across the country in cities, Norfolk in my area, Portsmouth in my area, both were the leading cities, and huge amount of disinvestment and people leaving behind a lot of infrastructure and fewer people to pay for it. And so I think if you rolled the clock back, it would be whenever that outward migration started in Jackson, probably that's the 70s. I haven't done a lot of historical research, but as that outward migration started, you get on this downward spiral for your utilities, your roads, all the things that were built for a larger population are now supported by a much smaller population. And it's even more challenging because the people that stay behind tend to be people that can't afford to move. So they're not saying that they're all in poverty or that but you have I think your median household income starts dropping in these outward migrations in whatever city you're in, whether you're in Jackson or Detroit or Buffalo, any of the communities that are struggling with these same issues. So I don't think you can put it on this administration at all. I think and I don't know you can point to any one decision, person, problem. It's this downward spiral of older core cities across our country. And I think there'll be the Nicholas School of Environment at Duke University has recently done a quick study, or maybe a long study, about this particular issue. And I believe they're going to run an op-ed in a number of national papers, including the Clarion Ledger in the near future. So, this is not unique to Jackson. Jackson is receiving the national attention. We're the poster child. We just may be ahead of everybody else on the water disaster, and maybe, yeah. But I hope not other.
To solve it.
I'm hoping we can solve it and maybe set a path forward for others that might get to this same point at some point in the future. I like to say that everyone's going to have a similar problem. Jackson might have just had every problem you could possibly have. So we may have more, but we're learning about all of them. So maybe we can help others avoid this in the future.
All right. Well, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, let's kind of talk about billing and paying for the services.
Great.
Welcome to the JMMF's Culinary Kitchen in partnership with Footprint Farms, the Farmers Hands Markets, and funded in part by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, sponsored by Humana. I am Chef Shishi, the owner of Just in Time, the featured chef of the JMMF Culinary Kitchen, where we prepare farm-to-fork centered, healthier, all-natural foods in the urban community. Our menu includes salads made from collards, kale, and spring mix varieties, fresh vegetarian soups, and fresh juice elixirs made daily. We're open Tuesday through Friday from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. And remember, what you put in your body is just as important as what you put on your body. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for staying with us here on Unmuted. Our guest today is Ted Henifin, and we are talking all things water in the city of Jackson. So tell us now how we're paying for this, if we're paying for it, if people are just using water for free and dancing in the streets. Talk to us about billing.
Jackson does maybe have a unique history in billing that's been a bigger challenge, probably going to be harder to fix ultimately than the infrastructure and water system itself. So it rolls back to the failed metering project in 2015, and anecdotally people are telling me there were problems before that. So I don't know how far back it goes, but I know we've had challenges for a variety of reasons. The metering project put us back. That was the Siemens project that failed, and the city ultimately sued Siemens, got their money. But that didn't solve our metering issue. We just got the money back, right? So, and we didn't even get it all because the lawyers took a big chunk of it. But at the end of the day, without reliable, dependable meters, people lost faith and confidence in the billing. Some estimates were made, and people started getting strange bills. Then there were folks that weren't getting billed at all as we tried to implement a new billing software while we were still trying to implement a metering project. Probably wasn't the best decision. It's been done, but it just is much more complicated that way. So we have been struggling to, get the new meters in. When people get the new meters, often they haven't had a bill in a long time, or they've had a low estimated bill for a while. So then they are questioning whether the new meters are accurate. I am confident the new meters are accurate, and it's going to take a while to get everything settled in. We already know we've got a number of properties in the city that potentially are using water and don't have accounts. So they are maybe the ones using the water and dancing in the streets. But we'll find them all at some point. Everyone needs to pay their share for the water. One of the problems with water across the country is the rate structure tends to be a bit regressive because everyone needs water. And if you're on the lower economic end of the spectrum, and we know here in Jackson we've got 25% of the population at poverty level or lower, that paying the same amount for water and having to use water because everyone needs it as someone with more means can be a significant impact on their annual or monthly budget, to the point where often they're paying 6, 7, 8, 10% of their gross income on their water and sewer bill on a monthly basis, while those at the other end of the spectrum probably don't even pay attention to their water bill, because water's fairly inexpensive still in the United States. I don't believe we've done a good job of pricing water to capture the full cost of providing it, reinvesting in the infrastructure, everything we need to be doing. And it needs to be self-supporting. We can't rely on the federal government to bail out every time a local water system hasn't been able to collect the right amount of money for their services. Fortunately, as I say that, Jackson is in receipt of $600 million in federal dollars, which largely goes to infrastructure improvements. We've got a little bit of money for some operation and maintenance help while we stabilize the revenue source. So the idea is we have a bridge a couple years here where we can use some of this federal dollars to offset the lack of revenue we're getting locally for operation and maintenance. My goal is to make sure we start collecting and getting the money we need, setting a rate structure that may be more equitable, where people don't necessarily pay the same for water across the whole spectrum. The rate may be the same, but it may be based on something other than just consumption, because the cost of water for us is not the water. We talked about where it comes from, the reservoir and the Pearl River. Any citizen can go out to either location, fill up all the jugs they want and take them home, and that's free water. That's how we get it. It's free water. It comes into the treatment plant. We don't pay anybody for that water, but we have to add some chemical and some electricity to move it. That's really the total cost of the actual water. Then you've got all that piping network, the pumping, the metering, the people to maintain all of that, the people to be at the plant every day to operate the plant. Those are all basically fixed costs, have nothing to do with the amount of water that you use on any given day. Sounds a little crazy, but if everyone didn't use water today, we would still have a full staffed plant. We'd have all the equipment there, everything be running. We just would use a little less power and a little less chemical. So costs are largely fixed. And so people get really hung up about, well, if I don't use much water, I shouldn't have to pay as much. Those fixed costs are a huge part of what should be paid by everybody and shared in some equitable way across the entire population that benefits from clean, safe, and available drinking water. And I understand that hasn't been the history here in Jackson, but it will be going forward. The water's been clean and safe. It just hasn't always been available. And we did have a few issues when it wasn't fully treated appropriately due to some problems at the plant. That was the long-term boil water notice last summer. And I know we've had some longer-term boil water notices in the past. But I think those are largely behind us. The pressure problem, where people didn't have water at all, which again had occurred in the summer, occurred again at Christmas time, those are almost extremely rare in the United States that a large number of people tied to a city system has no access to water. Because it's one thing to buy bottled water to drink. It's a different thing to have to not have water to shower, wash your clothes, wash your hands. It's so much more challenging at that point, flush your toilets. And so that is such a rarity. I think that's why we are really focused on the distribution system and pressures as our first priority. No one should be without water, except if a neighborhood pipe breaks. Yes, there'll be a few hours or one day outage. Those things will continue. They happen across the country, but those aren't what Jackson's been facing in the past. They've been facing large scale loss of water entirely. And we are really focused on getting rid of that. So I don't even remember where we started on this question, but somehow I got back there.
But the information
we're on Billy.
It was Billy. It was all about Billy.
And so we got to pay for all that. And I think you're going to see some proposals in this summer from the Jackson Water on how we might change rate structuring. People need to pay the bill too. And I know shutoff is a very brutal tool. But you walk out of the grocery store with your cart and you haven't checked out, someone's going to stop you and turn you around, and it could be a brutal tool as in the police. So when you use water, you need to pay for water, and we're going to find everyone that is. And so everyone needs to pay their fair share and what they can afford, and we're going to find a way to make that work here in Jackson. And that will make the water system sustainable going forward, especially with this influx of federal dollars to make a lot of investments, long-term investments in the infrastructure to make sure it's ready for the next 20, 30, 40 years going forward.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the wastewater that I caught the tail end of on the news. How does that fit into drinking water, bathing water?
Well, in the industry, we've been talking about one water for a long time. There's everyone talks about their own part of the water equation, whether it's your groundwater, your stormwater, your drinking water, your wastewater. But at the end of the day, they're all connected because the wastewater, it comes from the drinking water ultimately, and it gets treated and put back in the environment. And in our case, the connection for Jackson in the interim third-party manager was really the billing side. So EPA was here to set this order in place to focus on drinking water, stabilize the drinking water system, make sure people have safe drinking water at pressure all the time. Then at the 11th hour, they threw in the Water and Sewer Billing Administration into that order. So that's really the connection to sewer from my current stipulated order that the judge appointed me under, is that I'm responsible for collecting and billing for water and sewer. And now suddenly I've got a much more interest in sewer because I'm billing for it. I need to try to control the cost. And when you look at a long-term financial plan, both those revenue streams really need to be blended and work together to retire debt, to do other things to put the system on a sustainable financial path forward. And because of those intertwined finances, I really felt that our success overall would work better if we were addressing our sewer issues with our water issues. And so we've had that conversation now with Judge Wingate. That's what made the news yesterday. We had a long status conference with the judge, and he's basically directed the parties. Now, I'm not party to the order. I'm appointed by the judge as an officer of the court. The parties are the City of Jackson, the Mississippi Department of Health. On the sewer side, it'll be Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, Department of Justice, and EPA. So those are the parties, and I am an officer of the court, so I'm not a party, but I did talk to the judge and said, in my observation, we could put these together under a similar vehicle, structure, so we can work on these simultaneously. And he wanted the parties to go back to the table and figure out how to do that. So that's what came up yesterday. The direction was pretty clear. He wants to put them together. I think everyone there, from Department of Justice, EPA, the city, they understand that. The city is very much in favor of it, and I think we'll see that in the next few weeks. In fact, he wants the parties back there in 2 weeks to show them how it's going to work. So he wasn't playing around with
he rarely
the needs.
does. Judge Wingate is pretty specific and pretty stern when he speaks.
He was and is. And I think he's got the best interest of the citizens of Jackson in mind. He takes this very, very seriously. And I'm glad to be working for him at this point in time. So it looks like as that starts to formulate, we've got a lot of sewer issues, which, as you may have taken from my background, we're running a large regional sewer entity. I actually have more experience on the sewer side than the drinking water side. Very similar concepts. You treat, you pump, you got pipes, you got services. In this case, I do feel like maybe I've got a little bit more experience on the sewer side, and so I'll be applying that to really help jumpstart our issues. Big issues here. Overflows, which end up backing up into some folks' houses, which I can't think of much worse than having sewage.
Tell me about an overflow.
So
what
overflows,
causes an
sure.
overflow?
So what happens, there's a couple types of overflows in the sewer world. And so one is called a dry weather overflow, meaning everyone's just going about their business, it's not raining, and for whatever reason, there's some sort of blockage in the pipe. And sewer flows largely by gravity, and so as it's flowing from houses upstream, it comes down and hits a blockage and can't go on to the treatment plant, it starts backing up. And then it comes out of the lowest point wherever it's confined in this pipe. So it might come out of a manhole, or it might come out of a clean out, one of the access points at your yard. Worst case, it backs up and comes out of your bathtub, or your floor drain in your garage, or your floor drain in your laundry room. That's really bad, right? You don't want sewage from your neighborhood coming up inside your house. And so we have a number of those happening, but we have a whole lot of these that are just coming up out of manholes and cleanouts and other openings in the ground around city. I think the estimate was 256 of these locations that pretty much are running out into the street or yards every day, all the time. And that's really pretty unusual for a sophisticated city sewer system. Most of them have wet weather overflows where rainwater gets into the sewer system, even though it's not supposed to. The stormwater system and the sewer system are separate here in Jackson. And rainwater, though, gets into all sewer systems, just at different volumes. And so if you have a very leaky sewer system allowing a lot of rainwater to get in it, or groundwater to get in it, during big rainstorms, you tend to have a lot of overflows that just occur during the storm. And I'm not saying that's any better than a dry weather overflow, but they're limited in duration because it's happening during a storm, largely diluted by rainwater. Still doesn't make it very good, but it's a very different problem than a dry weather overflow, which is just everybody upstream of that location's wastewater is coming to that point and coming out of the pipe as opposed to going to the plant. And that's what a sewer overflow is. So, we're going to be laser focused on the correction to that. A lot of that is maintenance. And again, under-resourced city for years, it hasn't had the capacity to do all the required maintenance. A lot of things get stuck in sewer lines. So here's my ad for don't flush unless it's pee and poop. Don't put any wipes down, no matter how they're labeled. They are not flushable. Don't put paper towels down. Don't put toys down. You should only put the water and what comes out of your body back into the sewer system. And as gross as that sounds, grease, terrible problem. Next time you're frying something up, please put it in a can, chill it, throw it in your trash. Don't pour it down the drain. So we've got these problems that, not again unique to Jackson. Every sewer system in the country is battling this on a regular basis. Things get put into the sewer system that don't belong there. They cause a blockage. Blockage causes the sewage to back up and ultimately come out in the neighborhood. So first thing we're going to do is do a lot of cleaning of those pipes where the overflows are occurring on a regular basis. And then we have to look for some of the root causes. And maybe root's a bad term there, a bit of a pun, because a lot of the causes could be roots. Roots go down into the sewer pipes and might not block it on an everyday basis, but enough debris gets into the sewer, maybe it's wipes or something else, they start getting hung up on that root. And next thing you know, they've created a blockage. Same thing happens with slight deformities in the actual physical pipe. It might have a slight joint offset. You know, the joint settled in one area, so stuff starts collecting on that. Collapses are a problem where pipe actually fails. And it doesn't take long to drive around Jackson. You'll see an area where the gravel has been put in a hole on the street, and then maybe a cone's put on top of it. That's not the way to fix that. You actually have to dig it up, find where the leak is or the break in the pipe, fix the break, and then fix the pavement. And we've got hundreds of those locations to go get and fix over time. So going to just be a lot of not really exciting work. It's going to be cleaning the lines, televising them to see if there are defects inside the lines, making those point repairs where the system has failed and you see the cones and the gravel in the street. And hopefully in very short order, we'll start immediately seeing some positive benefits in the sewer system.
Well, and in that sewer system, just to go to school, the water goes in, and then when you flush or run water down a drain, that goes out in another pipe or something, and that's the sewer water.
That is it. So everything that goes out of a drain in your house, whether it's your kitchen sink, your shower, your bathtub, your toilet, everything that's got a drain line is tied to that sewer line that comes out of your house and connects to a different pipe in the street and then flows ultimately to the treatment plant. So we've got a few different treatment plants here in Jackson, the largest being the Savannah Street plant. They all need a little bit of work as well. They are contract operated, and they've been contract operated for some time, probably for the same reasons that we had to turn to contract operator for the water plant. Just hard to find staff, hard to keep them trained, just all those challenges. And again, I think one of the things we're committed to, Jackson Water as well as Jacobs, is building that pipeline, working with JPS, working with Hinds County Community College, to start getting water curriculum in place and making folks recognize there are real opportunities for careers, employment in water. Portable. Every community has a water system pretty much across the United States. So you learn how to do that here. Ideally, you stay in Jackson and work here in Jackson and raise your family in Jackson. But you also have the opportunity to move to another community and use those same skill set. Always job openings in water. These are careers that you can really get great career start with a GED or a high school diploma and go to work in water and make a great living for your family, a very stable living. Not going to be rich, but you're going to be middle class, and you're going to feel good about what you're doing because you're making a difference for public health and for the environment.
Well, I tell you, you have just educated us, given us reasons to be optimistic about water, and now sewer water in the city of Jackson. When we come back, we're going to see kind of what are our next steps and where we're going. We'll be back unmuted.
Thanks.
Footprint Farms is a beautiful 68-acre vegetable and cattle farm located in Jackson, Mississippi, and is Mississippi's largest urban farm. The mission of Footprint Farms is to provide the community access to healthy food choices, introduce our youth to agriculture, and provide training and technical assistance to small farmers and ranchers. The farm is open to the public every Friday from 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. to purchase fresh produce or visit us at the Mississippi Farmers Market located near the fairgrounds. We accept all forms of payment, including EBT and SNAP benefits. Looking for a beautiful venue for your next wedding, family reunion, or dinner? Footprint Farms offers a 3,000 square foot facility on 5 beautiful acres, perfect for your next event. For more information, visit our website at footprintfarms.com, Facebook and Instagram at Footprint Farms, or call us at 601-910-5534. Footprint Farms, farm fresh, City Suite.
Welcome to the JMMF's Culinary Kitchen in partnership with Footprint Farms, the Farmers' Hands Markets, and funded in part by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, sponsored by Humana. I am Chef Shishi, the owner of Just in Time, the featured chef of the JMMF Culinary Kitchen, where we prepare farm-to-fork centered, healthier, all-natural foods in the urban community. Our menu includes salads made from collards, kale, and spring mix varieties, fresh vegetarian soups, and fresh juice elixirs made daily. We're open Tuesday through Friday from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. And remember, what you put in your body is just as important as what you put on your body. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Welcome back to Unmuted. We are here today with Ted Henifin, the Jackson Water Czar, making things happen and improving lives in the city of Jackson as it relates to water. So tell us, what are our next steps?
So I think over the next several months, again, we've been at a full sprint. We hope to, our goal is to really improve our communication. I know a lot of people are wondering, why we haven't been more communicative with what we're doing, but we've been so busy. It's been hard to stop and let people know what we're doing. But we're getting to the point where on our website, there'll be a link for some video updates. The first one's going to be posted this week. Again, we're working with a local Fahrenheit group, very great creative PR team that's working with us on communications. And they've developed that first piece, and you'll see more of those. So that first one focuses on the large leak repair we made, which we didn't even talk about our leaks, but the 5 million gallon a day waterfall at the old Colonial Golf Course. That was quite the evolution, and it was great to find it and great to get it fixed. But we know we're losing more water, so there'll be a lot of work on finding leaks, continued work on figuring out why the pressures are not like they should be and what valves are closed. There'll be a lot of work going on that. We should see the first small pipe replacement project go out sometime this summer, and we will at some point have a prioritized list. We're going to do a couple pilots just to understand what the issues are when we actually try to do this on a block by block basis. And once we've figured out what that looks like, we'll develop a schedule with a list so people could ultimately look up their street and see, are they going to be next year or are they going to be 8 years from now? But at least give some folks an idea of where they are in that schedule for the small pipe replacement. That'll be out soon. We continue to do all the work at the plants, largely invisible to the public. We hope to start having some open houses so that people that are curious about how water is treated and the process and the people that are doing that, they'll have the opportunity to visit the plants and see what happens and where their water comes from and how it's treated. So again, trying to be transparent, a better communicator overall, because it's just been a race to this point. And again, our priority has been get clean, safe drinking water to people. And I think we're starting to see some progress in that area. And again, we're hoping to see a lot more on the communication side, community involvement. We are going to set a number of meetings early this summer to get some input from the citizens about who they would trust to run the water system for the next 20 years. This interim order it ends at some point. And then we need to figure out what the future is for Jackson's water, who runs it, who's in charge of it, who's responsible to the citizenry to make sure it continues to happen. So a lot of work to be done in that area, and obviously getting community input is critical to understand trust. In fact, we put out a survey this week. Some of your viewers may have received that in the last couple days. We're working with University of Oklahoma PhD program that's focused on trust. And they developed a fairly short mobile phone-based survey to understand how people trust our water today as a baseline, with the idea that we hope that the work we're doing, the transparency, as much communication work as we can do, and the actual delivering of water on a daily basis can improve the trust. Because I think at the end of the day, my conversations with residents in Jackson, they haven't trusted the drinking water for decades, maybe generations. Very few people drink the tap water, and they are surprised when I say it's perfectly safe. I drink it all the time. I've actually meant to bring a drinking water bottle here and drink it on the camera for you. But it's going to take a long time to rebuild trust in drinking water. And I keep saying everything's not unique to Jackson. That's not either. The last survey I saw nationally, 32% of Americans drink their tap water straight from the tap. That's a pretty low number for a very regulated and highly successful public drinking water infrastructure across the United States. I think only 32%. And they're buying bottled water, which they don't know the quality of, they don't know the source. Has a lot of plastic waste. It takes a lot of effort to go grocery store and buy all that bottled water. You can drink great water right out of your tap, but it's going to take a while for people to believe me, and maybe a generation. So that's not going to be me that's going to convince them. It's the success of our work and the fact that the water is always there. It's clean, it looks good, it smells good, and it tastes great.
Well, I have noticed that the boil water notices have reduced. I've noticed that, and I have a son that lives in South Jackson, so he's noticed. So progress has been made, and people are noticing that, but it's another thing when you start talking about drinking it straight out of the tap. Now, I live in one of the burbs, in rural metro burb, and of course my water tastes absolutely wonderful. I drink it out of the tap all the time.
I'm drinking it all the time. I live right in Jackson. I work in Jackson. I drink the water. It's great.
Well, I spend more time in Jackson, but I always drink bottled water these days.
When I first was here and the boil water notice was still going on, the day it got lifted, I went to a local restaurant bar and was buying people drinks if they would drink a glass of tap water. And that was hard to do at that point.
You didn't spend much money, did you?
Got the conversation started though.
Right. But look, tell us a little bit more about this training that you mentioned a little bit early on, which may provide opportunities for employment and that kind of thing. Is a curriculum already set? When will the first class start? All of that. I may be getting ahead.
You're definitely getting ahead.
Okay.
But you know, that's definitely on our focus at this point. And to start it out, we did found a scholarship at the Community Foundation, and they just awarded the first scholarship. It was for a JPS student who was going to go to Hines Community College and pursue a science or technical career that could lead to our course of study. It didn't even have to be a degree. Mm-hmm. Course of study that could lead to a career in water. And so that first scholarship has been awarded, and I didn't bring the name with me, but we are going to be publicizing that, and hopefully with an interview of the young scholar that received that. We will be awarding another one this fall. So that's the first sort of toe in the water on the workforce development piece. We need to develop curriculum. We need to build the partnership with JPS and with Hines, and I think or maybe with Jackson State as well. But we're really, the focus here and our challenge in our industry across the country, finding people that want to work with their hands and actually help. You can't run a water plant from an office. I mean, there's jobs where you do actually sit behind a control panel and do a lot of work, but at the end of the day, you still have to go out and you have to turn valves and you have to test water and you have to do the science piece, but you also have to be out and about to do that and make repairs to pumps. And we're, as a nation, running out of people that want to work with their hands, like the generation before us. And these are great opportunities, but not everyone's going to get to sit behind a computer and be the boss and that be their career path as they come out of high school. So got to reset maybe a large mindset within the whole United States. Again, it's not unique to Jackson. To get folks early to recognize that they can make a difference. They don't have, if they aren't college bound and they don't really have interest in being college bound, they can make a huge difference using their skills on water, at water plants, at wastewater plants, and working in the system. So again, we're struggling, and we really want to build that part of the curriculum. So I do think there's still a need for higher degree, advanced degree professionals, which we can work with Jackson State. Our initial approach is going to be more on the trade side of apprenticeship and working with JPS and Hines to see what we can do to develop a curriculum that leads to that. There's programs we can replicate from across the country. That's another thing. We don't have to start from scratch. There's plenty of utilities that have found ways to build apprenticeship programs, work with their high schools to start a pre-apprenticeship track from high school right into an apprenticeship, where folks, again, my experience in Hampton Roads, we had the first Department of Labor approved apprentice program for wastewater operators, started in 1979, and has been graduating anywhere from 12 to 20 people a year, and they go from getting hired after high school to an apprentice program that was paying them, in today's world, it's about $40,000 a year. They get paid while they're going to school. They get work on-the-job training as well. In 3 years, they're a licensed operator making $50,000 plus on their way to a very satisfying career. And those opportunities it's like winning the lottery for a lot of young people that may not have the opportunity to go to college and do other things. So they're not in debt, they're making money, and they're doing something that's great for their community.
Well, I think that's wonderful, and hopefully we'll be getting more information about that so that maybe we can steer some of these young folk into that kind of program. We'll be helping them, we'll be helping the city of Jackson, and helping the nation overall, because now they'll have some mobility to go somewhere else and work in that industry. That's one of those little surprise nuggets we've gotten today. So someone who may be interested in applying for that scholarship in the fall, they just need to...
They should start watching the Community Foundation website for scholarship opportunities. They're listed on there. They have the application time frame and date. We tried to make it a relatively easy application. I didn't want to be overly burdensome, but did need to know a little bit about the person and what their goals and desires are. But it's not a big reach, and I think it's a potential life-changing concept that you get a full year or a full semester fully paid for with that scholarship, and the opportunity to apply again for future semesters. So it could get you all the way through an associate's degree at Hines, which would be awesome. And we'd love to see that. And in our ideal world, they stay here in Jackson, they work for us. The other place they should be watching is the Jacobs.com, which is the contractor that's got the plant operation. They are still trying to fill out their needs. They're looking for maintenance folks particularly, and some more operators. So opportunity there to get in on a ground level and really build your career with Jacobs, a national company, greatly resourced and with locations across the country needing people to work. So again, not encouraging anyone to leave Jackson. We want you to stay. But there are some opportunities beyond Jackson once you get some of this training and experience behind you.
Well, great. Well, I just want to take the last few minutes to express my appreciation for you coming here. You're in tune to Unmuted.
Thank you.